This is a rant about aesthetics, or more so a rant about rants about aesthetics. Stay with me here. Some people are against aesthetics for reasons that I feel are more so generalizations and misinterpretations that I'm here to debunk with cold, hard opinions. But first, what even are aesthetics? Wikipedia defines aesthetics as the branch of philosophy concerned with the nature and beauty and the wrong. Aesthetics, aka cores, define a group of pretty things that share common characteristics. They're typically related to fashion, such as coquette and Y2K, but they can also encompass design styles like Fruiter Arrow and Weirdcore. So, why do people like aesthetics? I think for the most part, people just like to romanticize their life. Would you rather be typing your essay all night, or be a disheveled author, writing down your last paper to your professor, creatively scribbling down every idea that comes to your mind, then trying to make sense of it to turn it all into proper literature? It's fun to imagine yourself in places and situations that you don't have access to. This romanticization aspect is especially relevant since a lot of current aesthetics were made during quarantine, a time when we're all chronically online and searching for an escape from our mundane lives. I have a whole video on 2020 aesthetics where I talk about aesthetics born during that time and why we found comfort in them. I make a lot of video on social media trends and discourse, so subscribe if that interests you. Also, from an artist's perspective, aesthetics and labels are incredibly useful in the design process. Like, I have this pin, I think it looks really nice, but for the longest time I could never think of an aesthetic that connected to it. I wanted to save more images like it, maybe make a character based on this style, but it was really hard to because I didn't know what it was called, so I didn't know what to search up to find more. I now know it's called Whimsy Twee, an aesthetic reminiscent of a retro childhood. Lots of ladybugs, buttons, fruits, and patterns. Naming aesthetics makes it easier to find and identify with them. You find a niche community that's interested in the same thing you like, and share fashion ideas, photos, and the joy of indulging. As I said before, I feel like some criticisms of aesthetics come from a place of misunderstanding. Generalizations and misinterpretations that honestly boggle me. I don't disagree with all of these criticisms though. I think there is some truth to some of them. We'll get into it. The first that's been a bit of a discussion recently. People aren't thinking for themselves in terms of fashion. I don't agree with this point because I feel like emulating a popular style does not equal this person doesn't think for themselves. There's this whole thing of good artists copy, great artists steal that I feel can be applied to fashion as well. You see this cool new style trending, it connects with you, so you incorporate parts of it into your own style. Using a personal example, Shoujo Girl was really trendy recently, and when I saw that style, I instantly fell in love. I love frilly, girly things, and that aesthetic has all of that. Lace, soft neutrals, little dresses. It's all so beautiful to me. And back to my point of labels being useful, now I have another word for something that I already like, and I know what to search for to find more of it. So yeah, attributing people liking a cool new style as them not thinking for themselves isn't always true. Another point of discussion is that aesthetics box people into specific styles and standards. I see comments talking about how they're too broad to fit into these specific aesthetics, and it's like, okay, then don't. There's no rule saying you have to definitively fit into these boxes. I wouldn't even call them boxes. They're more like a flexible shape with a hole big enough for you to leave and enter. Some people who like aesthetics talk about how they want to find an aesthetic that they identify with, because some people like labels. I like labels. And again, it's nice to be part of a community of people who have the same interests as you. It's also natural to be into different, sometimes contrasting styles. It's funny to be into opposite ends of a spectrum. That doesn't lead to the genuine belief that you can't be into both kidcore and dollette. Finally, there are discussions about trend hoppers. There are people who buy a bunch of stuff to fit into trends and then throw them out after a couple months, but I feel like this is an overrepresented demographic in these discussions. Most regular people aren't doing a haul every week to fit the new trend because most normal people don't have the money to waste like that. It's usually influencers who buy a bunch to capitalize on these trends. I assume that most people are just casual enjoyers, following the style with what they have, maybe buying a clothing piece or two. Either that or they're like me, saving a bunch of pictures of clothes that you'll never buy because every site that sells them is a dropshipper. Now for this final part, I feel this may be a little controversial, but hear me out. I think some aesthetics could be considered subcultures, or more so subcultures in the making. Okay, I'm actually gonna paraphrase from Wikipedia this time. Subcultures are groups of people that stray from the dominant culture, developing their own norms and values. Similar to aesthetics, they often have a fashion style associated with them, but they differ in that there's not as much of an emphasis on the fashion. Most subcultures are born from having an interest in the same music genre and holding certain political beliefs that stray from the dominant one. There's a depth and history to subcultures that most aesthetics don't have, which is why most people wouldn't consider the terms interchangeable. Before I start on this aesthetic subculture connection, I would like to clarify that there is some exaggeration as to how specific aesthetics are. There are really niche aesthetics, of course, but most times I see someone talking about aesthetics, they always mention coastal grandma, tomato girl, latte girl, as if those are the main aesthetics. The titles of them all sound really goofy and hyper-specific, which does feed into that idea that it's unnecessary to name something that specific. On the contrary, most aesthetics that are really trendy right now have actually been trending for years and are pretty broad, like dark academia, cottagecore, 2020s alt, etc. And they do have a core beyond just fashion, but that part's rarely discussed. Getting into aesthetics that are potentials for subcultures, dark academia and that girl are two of these big communities centered around something more than fashion. They've all got lifestyles, hobbies, and media associated with them, whether that be enjoying classic literature or making healthy smoothies. Especially for that girl, participating in the lifestyle is what makes you part of the community. Self-improvement in a physical and mental sense is a core value of the community, so boiling it down to wearing cute outfits to the gym would be a really oversimplified view. It's hard to make an aesthetic a subculture if we keep on calling them aesthetics and reducing them down to the shallow outsider view we see. There are already denominations of these communities happening, like cottagecore having goblincore, the branches of academia, and the many forms of coquette. Personally, I doubt that something shallow would be able to break down into all these subgroups that have their individual identities while still being tied to a core message/theme. It's kind of ironic in a way because some members of subcultures complain about new Gen Z members being shallow and ignoring the history and movements of the subculture, then proceed to be ignorant about the budding Gen Z subcultures, reducing them to fashion style. In Minalei's video about the rise of aesthetics, she talks about how a lot of new aesthetics are mass-produced by brands before they get the chance to form their own real identity. There's this broken life cycle where you start with a budding aesthetic, then it picks up in the internet mainstream, brands capitalize on it, then it dissipates before it gets to form its own real identity. The aesthetics then get dismissed due to this lack of identity and perceived shallowness. You can't compare a community that's 4 years old to one that's 40 plus years old. Of course it seems shallow now, it's still creating that core. And you're also just seeing the marketable surface parts of the community, the same way the mainstream only saw the surface parts of the alternative community. There's also a possibility of fandoms becoming the new subcultures. They also center around a common interest, typically in a certain media or hobby, and have loads of discussions, events, art, and history surrounding them. I believe there's a chance for aesthetics and fandoms to become the new subcultures, but not in the same way as before. Online spaces are replacing physical ones. These trends were made in a time where we had to stay at home, so their setting has always been online and will probably remain mostly online. I don't see this as less valuable than physical spaces. Could even be considered better because now you have people from around the world all participating in and enjoying the same thing. It makes it way more accessible to be part of these communities. Another difference is that most subcultures are born from a shared music interest and sometimes political belief and grow more traits from there. Nowadays, they're typically born from a fashion style and the rest of their attributes grow out from there. There's also been revivals and waves of previous subcultures. Teen is getting a revival right now amongst teens, and some people who were in the community for a while aren't really liking how things are getting changed up. I started getting a lot of videos about scene recommended to me, and I saw this one that was a rant about scenecore. They said people were switching up scene, getting rid of what is actually scene music, metalcore, crunkcore, etc., and replacing it with what they think scene music is. hyperpop. They talked about how it's messed up because the core part of scene is the music. I understood some of their points because that is disappointing. Some weeks later though, I was scrolling through the aesthetic wiki and I stumbled across scene core. So it turns out scene core isn't even trying to be scene. It's just scene x nightcore. It's inspired by scene in terms of visuals, but it's got a different music style, mostly nightcore and hyperpop. It's also more than a fashion style. Its core belief is that cringe culture is dead and people should free themselves from the fear of judgment. So this person in the video complained about how people are ruining scene, trying to turn it into an aesthetic / core, when it's actually its own thing derived from scene. It's ironic because scene itself is a denomination of emo, and originally you were seen as a poser for indulging in it, just for history to repeat itself with scene core. Honestly, some of this poser talk sometimes sounds like older people bullying younger newbies for being new and uninformed about a community they just discovered, instead of giving some constructive criticism and understanding. Like, if you get into it too fast, you're a consumerist poser, but then if you're not into it enough, you're an uneducated poser. This is what I mean by it feels like older people are misunderstanding new communities and picking at them without trying to stay past the surface. So yeah, overall, aesthetics aren't as shallow and consumerist as they're made out to be. They're communities centered around media, lifestyle, fashion, and more. They give us escapist fantasies in useful terms. There's a structure in their labels, but they also expand our interests and give us confidence to try new things. Some aesthetics border on being subcultures, although they're still forming that core, and will present differently than subcultures of the past. In conclusion, aesthetics are good, at least to me. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree that aesthetics could become the new subcultures. My last video about 2020 TikTok trends expands on the topic of aesthetics and fashion trends, so check it out. Anyways, bye bye.